Hello and welcome to the channel today. I am Will and we're going to be talking about 5 books that I've loved recently that I think most people will really enjoy. So there's a lot of books that I've really loved over the last few months and I'll be talking about that over on The Brothers Gwyn with my brother Ed. Of course, talking about my top 10 favourite reads of 2024 so far, but that includes ends of series, middle books and some random things as well. Whereas today, I'm just going to be talking about 5 books I loved that you could dive straight into and that I think would be enjoyed by a wide variety of people. Sorry if my voice is a little odd. I've had a few weeks off recording because I've been quite ill. I've come back from finishing my first year at uni and I've just been, I think, hit by exhaustion. So I've been ill and I've still got a slight cough, but I'm feeling good. And today I'm ready to talk about 5 books I've really enjoyed that I think you will as well. First up, I'm starting with something quite different, and that is a short story collection by none other than Stephen King. This is a recent release. It came out in May, I believe. And so, yeah, I got onto the bandwagon pretty quickly. I believe there's 13 short stories in here. I thoroughly enjoyed 11 of them. One I could not read because it is called Rattlesnakes and it spoils Cujo, which I've not read yet and didn't want spoiled, of course. And then there was one that didn't quite click with me. It was quite experimental and yeah, it just didn't hit home with me. But the other 11 I enjoyed for so many different reasons. Of course, it's Stephen King. So a lot of these are going to have a supernatural element. There's a story where you come across the answer man who he can tell you the answer to anything that you ask, but you only have a minute or 3 minutes to ask him. And so it's about knowing the answers to what is going to happen. Does that enhance your life or does that just create constant fear and tension because you don't get all the answers, only the ones that you ask in that time. So this man, he fears for his children and things like that. And it's a great kind of psychological analysis of, is it good to know what is going to happen? It's one of those questions that we always want to know and predict what's going to happen in the future, but would it actually be good for us? And so I love that Stephen King takes a very simple idea in many of these stories like that and then crafts a really intriguing tale around it with characters that just leap off of the page. We've got a great variety of characters. We've got stories where many of the central figures are children, and Stephen King continues his reputation of being able to portray children brilliantly. They're engaging and intriguing, but they still feel like children. He doesn't make them feel like adults in children's bodies like many books do, because of course, as an adult, it is hard to write about being a child because you forget what it feels like, you forget how they would react, and you kind of force them into the narrative to make decisions. But Stephen King is one of the few that can do this expertly, and he continues that trend here. I think, of course, he's been an author for so many years that his writing and crafting of character just feels flawless and effortless. I've read a lot of his earlier books, which I've absolutely loved, but the writing here just, I think it's even better than in his earlier books because of he is just an expert now and he just knows how to bring characters to life. And so yeah, that is You Like It Darker, a book that for a short story collection I think has something for everybody. And I think being discussed a lot lately are palate cleansers, books that can really get you back into reading or make something feel fresh before you dive into something bigger. And I think this is a great place to go if you're going for a palate cleanser, because you could read 1 or 2 short stories, go away, read a few more. That is the fantastic nature of a short story collection. And Stephen King has enough depth in these stories that they remain with you despite the very minimal page count. Next up, we have some historical fiction, and this is Arthur by Giles Christian, another book that has been released very recently. This is in fact one of my top 3 favourite reads of 2024. So this is the 3rd book of the Arthurian Tales trilogy, because book 1 is Lancelot, book 2 Camelot, and book 3 Arthur. But they aren't a series as you would normally think. They are more companion tales. Each one is a standalone with different POVs, some recurring characters, but 90% are a different cast. And so you could dive straight into Arthur without having read Lancelot or Camelot and still really, really enjoy it. I think if you read Lancelot, there'd be a lot added to the experience, but you can definitely read this and really enjoy it on its own. This is the Arthurian legend as never seen before. There are a lot of Arthurian mythological books out there, and those like Bernard Cornwell's Warlord Chronicles that are steeped in history and historical fiction. But Giles Christian adds a lot to the Arthurian legend, which is a very bold move. Here we have 2 leading characters. We've got an old man who has definitely got a past about him, and he is haunted by that past, but we're not quite sure what it is at first anyway. And then we've got another POV, a different timeline of King Arthur, but as a boy before he was the king that everybody knows. And it's really about how he came to be crafted into the person that would commit these great deeds that would become the legends that would inspire generations to come. And this is Giles Christian, in my opinion, at his very best. He's always had lyrical prose, but in a way that isn't purple, and he doesn't kind of exploit it in a way that he's showing off. He uses it to enhance the story. The characters here are standout. It's stark, it's brutal. There is no glorification in this, and the characters reflect that. Most of them have had a very hard life. They've been beaten down by the trials and tribulations that they've faced. And I love kind of the journey they go through in Arthur feels very believable. And we've got that contrast with the other older characters with the younger characters who are full of hope. And I really just think it's beautiful how Giles Christian shows the influence these different generations have on each other, where the younger generation are kind of influencing, restoring a bit of hope to the elders, but also the younger people there having kind of this disillusionment as well. And it is a beautiful journey in that sense. It's dark in many ways, and this is fitted into the historical landscape of Britain as the Saxons are taking over. And I love that historical period, and I love what Giles Christian does with it. He's excellent at action. There's some great action sequences that are very tense. Good villains, great protagonists, and a whole host of other characters in between, because the characters are the heart and soul and the best part of this book. And I think the majority of readers, what we're looking for most is good characters, those that we can engage with, that we can root for, and those that we're rooting against as well. And that is Giles Christian's kind of greatest thing about his writing, in my opinion. And Arthur is just a wonderful, wonderful achievement of writing. And I think that everybody should read this. I'll be talking about it a lot more on the Brothers Gwyn and possibly a review on this channel as well. But for now, that is the second book I'm talking about today. Historical fiction, Giles Christian, the Arthurian legend. What more could you ask for? Next up, I Play of Shadows by Sebastien de Castell, book one of a new series. In this, we follow Damalas Shadowmantane. Initially, he's running away from a crew of people calling him Rabbit and wanting to kill him. And he somehow survives and escapes by being taken into a play troupe, as in a performance, a theatre group. And that is a great way to kick off. It just immediately shows how creative, how random, and just how unpredictable Sebastien de Castell's works are. I think this is the 13th or 12th book I've read by him, and another one, tick. He's never failed to disappoint, and this is a great start to a new series that it has heart, but a lot of humour as well. It's one of those books that can just make you laugh out loud, and despite all the laughter and that humorous aspect, it still has tension and depth and heart. He makes sure to not have humour to the detriment of the seriousness of the story, and vice versa. He really plays to his strengths, and he's got a great cast of characters in here. And Damalas Shadowmantane, as he's hoping to fade into the background in this theatre group and then escape once the attention's drawn away from him, somehow this theatre group actually ends up with him being thrown into the centre of the politics of the city and becoming possibly the most well-known person in the city as well, attracting even more enemies, and he is sucked into a plot far bigger than he ever imagined. And so yeah, it's a really great premise. Sebastien de Castell executes it brilliantly. Play of Shadows, I love from the characters to the event. The dialogue is just exceptional in here. And I think Sebastien Castell used to be a theatre actor or dabbled a bit in that. And I love the humour he has in kind of self-mocking aspects of it, but also showing the power of art, the power of theatre, and the power of performance. And that's quite a rarely explored theme, especially in the fantasy genre. And yeah, so that makes this an even more unique read, and another reason why you should read Play of Shadows by Sebastien de Castell. If you're kind of bogged down by all the depressing reads, which may be brilliant but still leave you kind of very sad at the end, and morose, then this is a book that can perk you up. Fourth up, I have Dreams of Fire by Shauna Lawless. This is a prequel to Ghoul's Song, which is her series starting with the Children of Gods and Fighting Men. Many authors, when they write a prequel or a novella, they fall into the trap of only the characters we've seen in the books are kind of present and vivid, whereas the new characters just don't really get much attention, of course, because of the page count. But Shauna Lawless is possibly the best I've found at giving enough attention to the new characters and actually having them as some of my favourite characters in the novella. Dreams of Fire, I think you should read before reading The Children of Gods and Fighting Men. You get a taste for Shauna Lawless's writing, you get a taste for how she is mixing Irish history with Irish mythology, and you get a taste for her writing style and how she brings plot into character and how she creates tension as well. There is far more focus on the political kind of character engagements rather than the action, but the action is present as well, and she uses that tension to feed into the interactions and the political actions and interactions between our characters. Wow, that was a mouthful, and yeah, I messed that one up. But Dreams of Fire had me hooked. I read it in 2 sittings. It was fantastic, and I really think you should read this before reading The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, which I also really loved. Shauna Lawless has a great writing style, and characters come to the forefront. They are absolutely exceptional. She is one of the best new voices in the fantasy genre, to be specific, the historical fantasy genre. And yeah, I love how the Irish history is mixed with the Irish mythology as well. It is something that is so unique that Shauna Lawless has found something that hasn't been done before, and in my opinion, she is just doing it excellently. Next up, I have a book that's been talked about quite a bit recently on this little corner of BookTube. So it won the SPFBO award recently, which is the best self-published fantasy book, and that is Murder at Spindle Manor by Morgan Stang. And so this is a competition where many reviewers are given a huge batch of self-published books that were released the year before, and the ones that overall get the highest ratings are pushed into further rounds into the competition. And then the final is a big event where I think there's 10 books in the final, and the reviewers read all 10 and they give a rating to each, and the one that has the highest average rating wins. And this year that was Murder at Spindle Manor. Just to give a bit of context, one of the previous winners was I think Never Die by Rob J. Hayes, and also Sword of Kagan as well by M.L. Wang, which of course has reached huge acclaim. Actually, I think I'm wrong. It wasn't Never Die by Rob J. Hayes that won. It was a different book by him. I think Never Die actually lost to Sword of Kagan. But anyway, it means that there's some great books that have been discovered and kind of given a lot more attention because of SPFBO. And Mark Lawrence has done a great job for the self-published community by creating this competition that really highlights some great new releases. And this year, because of that, I have found Murder at Spindle Manor. This is a Sherlock Holmesy fantasy detective style book. It is quite short, I think about 200 pages, 230 pages, and it is done exceptionally well. I think it took about probably the first 20-30 pages for Morgan Stang to really find the kind of the hook for this book. It took a while to feel a lot more confident, but then it really feels like a different kind of writer, or a different phase of Morgan Stang, because the rest is told so confidently. We've got creatures, monsters, twists and turns, different elements of this detective style book. I love the kind of premise, kind of playing with that Agatha Christie vibe of all the suspects are in one room over one night, and you're going to find out who it is by the end of it. But how are we going to get there? And it's something that it's a trope we've seen many times before, but when done well, it's great. It's a trope for a reason, because we love it when it is executed well. And Morgan Stang does it brilliantly, in my opinion. As I said, took a little while to kick off, but then the characters, I love how immediately they are vivid. They make their mark, they make their impression, and within the first meeting of them, you know exactly who they are, and you're intrigued to find out more about each and every one of them. And I'm really looking forward to carrying on with book 2, but this is a great place to start. It wraps itself up, so you can read it as a standalone, and as I've been talking about in this video, it's a great book that I think you should dive straight into. There we go. They are 5 books or works that I've really enjoyed recently that I highly recommend, and I think you should read as well. So here we've got horror, historical fiction, fantasy, and historical fantasy. So yeah, quite a wide mix. I wanted to make sure I incorporated a lot of different ones, so maybe, hopefully, at least one intrigues you. Please let me know if any of these have intrigued you. Have you read any of them already? And are there any books you've loved recently that you would highly recommend that someone can dive into immediately. Please let me know in the comments below. But everyone, as always, thank you so much for joining and stay safe.